Hi, good evening, and thank you for joining us on day 257 at Gota Goyaya. I messed it up right at the beginning. At GGY, Good Governance Yaya. We have a very special guest today. As you can see from the enthusiasm in our group, we have a pretty big turnout to see Honorable Eran Vikramaratne, Member of Parliament and Member of the Opposition. Also joining us today, we have Damaris, we have Dushi, Angela, Imran, Chiranta, Angeline, Nisha, Tassie, Chris, and I'm Shaminder. We have some people at the back too, but who shall remain nameless, right? Shall I start naming names? No? Okay, all right. So let me give a quick introduction to Eran. In fact, you may not recall, or you're struggling to recall, but you were actually our very first political guest. As a group, we decided some time ago, during when the People's Movement rose up, we came together as a group. We were inspired by the Aragalaya, but we are very much neighborhood protesters, and we have been there for 257 days. And then after the departure of the then president, we decided to actually, we were a daily protester up to that point, and we scaled it back to twice a week, and we have been continuing ever since. So it's 257. But we felt that we as a group needed to engage the political parties who we feel are part of the solutions going forward. So since then we have spoken, actually we're the very first. We have subsequently spoken to many other people, initially off camera, and then later we decided to do it as a roundtable discussion like this. So thank you for joining us once again. So we don't need to repeat the conversation we had last time. I think we have far more pressing questions now. So to introduce you, you're an economist and a banker. You were the State Minister for Finance and held the responsibility in other ministries as well. Your professional career commenced at Citibank, where you were Vice President, I believe. You were the founding CEO Director of NDB Bank, and at the time of your departure, the Group CEO Director of the National Development of NDB. You championed the Sri Lanka initiative and was the founding CEO Director of the Information Communication Technology Agency, ICTA, served on the board of the BOI and was advisor to the Ministry of Science and Economic Reform. You spearheaded the Climate Parliament Global Initiative in Sri Lanka, advocating for environmental sustainability and regional cooperation for sustainable energy. And I believe your core interests are anti-corruption, economy, education, empowerment, and autonomy of women. You're also actively and passionately engaged in the areas of justice, rule of law, and good governance. In other words, you speak our language. Those are the very things that we fight for as a group. So Eran, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So we'll hopefully go on for about an hour. Initially, what I do is we just talk a little bit about things that were very current, especially things that have happened this week. So I will just mention a few things and maybe get your thoughts on it. To start with, we heard Donald Lu, the additional Secretary of State Department, right, mentioned that that Sri Lanka is a great comeback story, and he mentioned a few key things. Sri Lanka, a year and a half ago, he said the country was in crisis, mass riots on the streets, queues, and he says now currency stable, food, fuel prices stable, reassurances on debt restructuring, IMF money is flowing. How do you feel about that particular characterization by the US official?
Thank you for inviting me. So it depends what you compare. If you are comparing people being on the street, there are no people on the street. So it depends what the comparisons are. And in that sense, there are differences. The Rajapaksa family has been pushed out of office or pushed out of power. So there is a difference there. The difference hasn't gone far enough, however, because if you look at it, Gotabaya Rajapaksa was legally elected president of the country, but his legitimacy was in question and he had to go. I don't think it's any different with the government. Its legitimacy is in question even now. And I also think that the legitimacy of parliament is also in question because we were all elected at the same time and it's time to go. In other words, people are suffering and let people decide, who should be in parliament, who should form a government, and I think people need to be given that opportunity to make that decision. So that hasn't really changed. In other words, there were some changes, but it hasn't gone far enough actually to make the big changes, you see. Yeah, so if you look at the economy, I think some of the things he has referred to on the economy, they have got an IMF program in place, and we had been shouting and screaming about that for a long time before they got into it, which is a good thing because it gives you some framework. And Sri Lanka's economic crisis says bad policy and bad management. There's no point blaming the rest of the world. We ruined it, you see. And now, there's some framework, at least there's some discipline that has come into the system. So we are still a long way because we have to go from stabilizing the situation to the growth phase. And we are still a long way from the growth phase. And on debt restructuring, still there is no agreement. The discussions have been dragging. And like in any commercial agreement, if the discussions drag on for too long, the cost of it also begins to grow, you see. And the cost has already grown by just not being able to close a transaction, probably by about $1 billion. You see, the cost even at the moment has grown. I've been explaining this to people, that these are commercial transactions. You go to the bank, you borrow money, you can't pay it, right? Either your assets have to be taken and sold and recovered, or if you're going into a negotiation, for sure, the bank is going to go after the accumulated interest as well. That's normal, that's natural, that's how it happens. So the same thing is happening to the country. So while I heard what you read about the US officials saying that, so I said it depends what you actually compare it. It's certainly no rosy picture.
Yeah, yeah. So, but a lot of people make the argument that if not for this president, who could have done it? And this week he again made the statement that he accepted the responsibility to run the government because no one else came forward. He says Sri Lanka has not fully recovered from the crisis, but is moving forward. Those were his words this week. Now, how do you feel about that particular narrative? Didn't you come forward?
Yeah, I would reject that narrative. That narrative has been promoted right from the beginning. And that narrative, the reason I'm rejecting is this. There was a call from the then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa that he wanted us to come and see him to discuss, how the changes should be made, you see. When that phone call came, it was decided that the General Secretary of our party, the national organizer, that's Ranjit Madhum Bandara, Tissa Attanayak, I can name them, Kabir Hashim, Harsha De Silva, and Eran Vikramaratne went to see him. I was the one who actually, in a sense, led the discussion. And I told him that if we don't move quickly and resolve this issue is going to spill onto the streets. I told him that, right? And I said the social cost to the country will be very, very high. I told him that we had brought a 21st Amendment to the Constitution, and that was to abolish the executive presidency. I said, instead of us bringing it, why don't you bring it? You're the president of the country. If you bring it now, right, then people will actually see it as important because your parliament will see it. You have the opposition, we are in opposition. There can be a 2/3 majority given. I explained in detail to him. And at one point, he stopped me and he said, he said it in Sinhala, we were talking in Sinhala, and he said to me, are you expecting me to go in 2 weeks? I turned to him and said, no. I said, that's something that can be discussed. He said the Bar Association had sent a proposal at that time and they were giving me 1.5 years, right, in that proposal. I said, this is something we can discuss. I didn't go to put a time limit, but at the back of my mind, obviously, I had a plan. Because if you abolish the executive presidency and power is taken out, power moves back to parliament and to a team rather than to one individual, we are changing the whole way the country is going to be governed, then, he could be, phased out. And then our General Secretary said this discussion needs to go forward, and he said Eran is the one we are nominating for this discussion to go forward. And then he had 2 people there in the room, 2 MPs, and he said, okay, they will take the discussion forward. The next day I called, and then I heard that, they were having plans to swear in Ranil Wickremesinghe. I don't buy into this narrative that has been made in the country, that we refused it. That is why Ranil Wickremesinghe was brought in. I think we are not that naive. The plan was all along to bring Ranil Wickremesinghe. Calling us into that room for the discussion was just a part of their whole game plan, you see, so that they could say that they actually invited the main opposition party, into doing this, and therefore that Sajith Premadas ran away, the opposition ran away. Certainly, if he came, we were going to have conditions. There's no question about it. You see, because the people on the streets, people who were protesting, wanted a change and a real change. You see, and we were not going to be playing with that. Right? We would have had an interim government, and we would have probably gone for elections in a shorter period, so that the people could decide who should actually be leading them. Because it was a social upheaval. People actually wanted to change. So this narrative, I completely reject that narrative. I see that every day, trying to say that everybody ran away, therefore Ranil Wickremesinghe had to take it. I think they had pre-planned it, and the good reasons. If you think about politics, right, Wickremesinghe has been in politics for 50 years, right? Rajapaksas as a family have been in politics for more than 50 years, right? And all these politicians at the top who have been there for long periods of time know each other quite well, right? They know each other well, and therefore there's always more to these stories than meets the eye. And then a narrative is made, the narrative is sold, and people are made to believe it. So I would completely reject that narrative.
Right. So, in a way, he achieved a lifelong dream in the process as well. And now we hear this week there are attempts to abolish the presidency. His office itself has made certain statements. Do you feel that it's a good faith effort to actually abolish the presidency, or is this some kind of political chicanery to delay elections further and deny people their franchise, as you mentioned?
Yeah, when we get closer to an election in Sri Lanka, always it surfaces that the executive presidency needs to be abolished. Every time it surfaces, every time. There is nothing new. It just surfaces, right? And then when people are running for office, they don't talk about it. They generally shy away from it. The JVP, right from the beginning, was opposed to the executive presidential system. They were opposed to it. Sajith Premadas, the leader of the SJB, has also said he's opposed to the presidential system. And then, of course, people who have run previously also said that they were opposed to the presidential system, they want to change the presidential system, so forth and so on. The only time we came actually close to abolishing it is when Chandrika Kumaranatunga, Bandaranaike, president, actually brought a new constitution to parliament in her second term. And she said, we'll abolish the executive presidency, we'll go for a normal parliamentary system. And she made the proposal. And she said, we'll pass it and it will be effective. The effective date is when she's relinquishing office. And then, of course, the United National Party, of whom I was a member, basically said, no, we can't do that. And we burnt the, I was not a politician then, but they burnt the constitution within the parliamentary chamber. That's the closest we ever got to it, you see, and we have never been as close as that. Then in 2015-19, when we were in government, right, we worked on the constitutional changes. We had committees, they went around the country, they gathered information, lots of things were done, basically, to look at a new system. But of course, then unplanned things happened, from the Easter bombing to the constitutional coup and things like that, and that couldn't be done. So now it's surfaced, the executive presidency must be abolished. The question now is, it's not that it needs to be done, but if you are going to do that, there are several steps in it. You cannot seriously fulfill all those steps before an election is due on the 17th or the 18th of September. That's really the issue, because we are almost at the end of February.
Okay. So if elections are not held, especially the presidential election, are we then in a sort of a constitutional crisis? Are we in a constitutional crisis at that point?
Don't even entertain the idea and even ask the question if an election is not being held. It is in the constitution, it's a law of the country, and every citizen basically needs to make sure that the law is implemented. I think for far too long we have let leaders decide that. You go to play a game of cricket, right? Before I go out there to bat, I know these are the rules of the game of cricket. Once I start batting, I can't be changing the rules of the game. If you want to discuss a change of the rules, certainly the ICC can have a discussion on it, but it won't apply to this cricket match. It will apply to the cricket matches of the future. And therefore, I don't think that even for a moment, anybody should be entertaining the idea of a postponement of the elections or getting out of the legal framework. Then the Constitution is what's supreme. The Constitution has to be upheld.
Right. I think somebody needs to tell that Vajra Bevardhan, right? he thinks that the president should be there for, 12 years or something.
I mean, the bottom line is this whole thing about abolishing the presidency. Before he became president, he was talking about it. Then absolute silence. Now that his term is coming to an end and he can't win the next election, suddenly he's brought it up again. I mean, it's no coincidence. He knows he can't win it.
I remember Sirisena doing the same thing. He knew he can't contest again, and he was like,
No, but
president.
but Eran, during the Yahapalana, that was the weakest the presidency was at that stage. I think 19th Amendment, right, where certain powers were reduced. And so on. But right now you have the strongest presidency, which I think was meant to have been enjoyed by a Rajapaksa. It was certainly not meant for Ranil Wickremesinghe. So I think that seat once is there is clearly very alluring. So will the opposition make a very clear sort of presentation to the people about how they will go about abolishing the presidency?
Yeah, so I would say to the people of this country that if you are not satisfied with the present presidential system, I think people should raise their voice everywhere that a change is needed. So those who are running for office, they need to give a commitment that they are for the abolition of the executive presidency. There was a Samagi Jana Balawegya lawyers convention which concluded about 10 days ago, in which the SJB leader Sajith Premadasa publicly said there that he is for the abolition of the executive presidency. Then we should be talking about what are the steps in actually doing it. So if you abolish the executive presidency, there are lots of other things that need to be looked with it. Right? One thing that you need to look with it is, can the present system of elections be the same? Because we have a proportional representative system, and the discussion in 2015-19 was, no, the same system can't be, we have to go to a mixed proportional system. What that means is, there are electorates in the country. We presently have 160, though there are no elections. So if we decide that maybe we need to have 100 electorates or whatever, some percentage is going directly where people will elect their representative and they have a local MP, going back to the system we used to have. And then the balance percentage, whatever that may be, and I'm not putting percentages here whether it's 50-50, 60-40, I think that has to be decided. And then the balance of that actually goes for the PR system. And the PR definitely has some advantages, there are some safeguards within it as well, and that's a mixed proportional system. So that certainly needs to be brought along. Then the other thing that we need to take a serious look at, and there was a seminar recently coordinated by the Honorable Karu Jayasuriya. There were several speakers at that, and I carefully listened to the speakers. I went for it, the abolition of the executive presidency, and Pakesoti Saravanamuttu, the head of CPA, made this point. He said we need to re-look at the national list also. Basically, the national list is not achieving the purpose for which it has been set. And that appears to be the consensus in the country. And therefore, if we are getting rid of the national list, then we will need to have a second chamber. Then if you are having the second chamber, this is basically Sri Lanka going back 50 years, because we used to have a second chamber. But then the second chamber, how it is constituted, it doesn't have to be a big chamber. It can be a smaller chamber, right? A small chamber, but how it is constituted needs to be looked at. And there have been some ideas on that as well. On the mixed proportional system, the German model has been looked at closely. And on the second chamber, we can even look at other models, and it can be even representatives from the provincial councils. It doesn't have to be a big chamber. We have only basically 9 provinces. It can be a small chamber, right? But it will be a second chamber with certain powers, which is a check and balance on parliament. Parliaments work on majority votes. Therefore, majoritarianism often prevails, right? So the checks and balances are not sufficient. Second chambers normally provide some checks and balances, and we need to look at that. So if the present president is serious about it, I would say put forward the proposals now on all these issues that I'm raising, so that we have a discussion in the country, and let's agree on a roadmap. You see, let's agree on a roadmap if you are very serious, right? And then if you agree on a roadmap, then we can get people committed to the roadmap and say we will do this. But using any reform as a pretext to move outside the constitution is an absolute no-go.
Right. Now, having said that, we haven't had the local government elections, provincial council elections.
Yeah.
Despite a Supreme Court order that says the election should be held, right? Or money should be allocated
Allocated money to be
released and for the elections to be held. Now, that has been completely ignored by the executive, and then subsequently normalized with various stories and narratives and all of that.
Why won't that happen again?
Why couldn't that happen again? Exactly. Why couldn't that happen again? I mean, we see so many things in bad faith. I mean, that's why we are out here, just
you
talking
said,
about
Eran,
it.
we shouldn't accept it.
Yeah.
You said we shouldn't accept it if they try to postpone
Yeah.
the election. But we've already accepted it once.
Because we've also seen like it's very hard to take him at his word. You have to follow his actions more closely to understand what his intentions are. Nominations were called, yeah, and
spent a
people
lot of
gave up
money.
their livelihoods
Lots
to
a lot of
contest
We
elections.
didn't see the opposition.
And printed the papers
Ballot
and everything.
papers, all
I
of
think
that,
some
yeah.
millions were spent.
Yeah.
Lost.
So why would we take him at his word?
Yeah, so I think that a message that we need to take to the country and needs to be understood is that countries and societies are not just about the economy. Countries and societies are about lifestyles. And if we have chosen a lifestyle where democracy must prevail, where there has to be freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of conscience, if we have chosen that to be our lifestyle, right, then we cannot allow anyone on the pretext of fixing the economy basically to touch that. The challenge is to turn around this country economically while preserving its democratic framework. That's the challenge. I'm shy to say that I was a part of a government in which they tried to do provincial council reforms, and up to today, 5 years later, a provincial council election has not been held. We have to learn a lesson from that and not let anybody mess with that. Maithripala Sirisena was president of the country, Ranil Wickremesinghe was prime minister of the country. They must take primary responsibility. I was just a member, of government, but they need to take primary responsibility. And there cannot be any repeat of that. And local council elections, what kind of crap are we talking? Saying that we don't have money, right, to hold a local council election, which will probably cost us maybe 6-7 billion rupees, right? We are talking nonsense when you talk about money. I mean, there are state-owned enterprises with accumulated losses of 400 billion rupees. 400 billion rupees, right? So what are we talking? So I think we cannot basically just go by trusting leaders, because the track record is not good in this country, whoever the leaders are. And therefore, we must make sure that everybody works within the framework of the law, and the law must be implemented. Therefore, I'm all for abolishing the executive presidency. And let's put the proposals forward. Let's have the public debate. Let's agree on a roadmap, right? But let's not mess with the constitution that's already there, and elections must be held on time.
Not to regress, Eran, but I think what Chaminda and I was also trying to ask was, it's already happened once through the postponement of the local government elections, and nothing happened, and they got away with it. We didn't see the opposition, both the main opposition, SJB as well as NPP, coming out making much noise against this. Why won't it happen again?
Yeah, it can.
I think it has already been contested for contempt of court, right? For not releasing the funds that were vacated from following court order. Yeah. I think there will be a serious repercussion in regard to contempt. Yeah. If they don't do it, they will have to face jail term.
Did SJB file a case on that?
We have. So what you are saying is, I know why you asked that we are not on the street for it. So some things you have.
Why won't it happen again for the presidential election?
No, there's nothing to stop it from happening, but they better understand that the repercussions will be very serious. It might take time for justice to prevail, but justice will prevail. We went to court on the economic crisis. It was an unprecedented case. Who is responsible for this economic crisis? And I must say, the Sri Lankan Supreme Court actually gave a judgment naming the people, naming Gotabaya Rajapaksa, named Mahinda Rajapaksa, named Basil Rajapaksa, the finance minister, named the two governors of the central bank, two secretaries of the Ministry of Finance, and some others. Landmark judgment. It's not political, it's a landmark judgment, right, that has actually been given. So here, I think that people need to remember that judgment is in place, and the consequences of that to people, to businesses and individuals can also follow in a judicial manner, and people can be held personally responsible, and that can follow in time to come. Therefore, I think that people need to understand that politicians and people in power, people like myself included, need to understand that if we violate the law, we can get away temporarily. For a time we can get away, but we are not going to get away. I think that certainly some changes have happened in the country with the social revolution, even with the Arugale. Some changes have happened in the country in the way people are thinking. I would say this, we have got judgments in the last 3 months, which we haven't seen in 30 years.
But have there been any repercussions because of that? I mean, they are enjoying our tax dollars by, living in palatial houses, and there's no real punishment, right? It's a judgment.
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that.
When someone actually in Parliament tried to bring up some kind of real repercussions, wasn't he ambushed in Parliament? Remember that time when, after... No, it wasn't Sajid. One of the opposition people actually brought up the judgment and said, there are civic rights or something needs to happen.
And then the fight.
Yeah, there was a brawl. There was a brawl in the Parliament, and nothing happened after that.
Yeah. So, no, what I'm saying is, I won't say nothing has happened is not correct. The mayor of Kurunegala, without proper authority, demolishes a building. and he has been basically sentenced and sent to jail, right? You've had a president giving a pardon. Process hasn't been questioned. We have gone to the courts and a judgment has been given, and the president's decision has been reversed, right? So I won't say nothing has happened. That's why I say that a few things have happened recently, and there have been other judgments also given by the court, right? I think your reference is more to the economic crisis, because that didn't call really for personal implications, but it may follow, is what I'm saying, because it will follow. Other cases will be instituted based on that judgment where people can be held responsible. So I know that it's like a silver lining, in a dark cloud, but I would say there's hope, because if this country is going to be put right, it's not going to be put right by parliamentarians there. It's when the professionals in this country stand up, the judges, the private bar, the Attorney General's department, and other professionals in the public service stand up, then this country can be put right. And they must stand up, because we are the people exercising power, and therefore others must stand up to say when we are really getting out of that framework.
Right. So one thing that we always talk about is accountability and justice. We simply don't see any form of accountability, any form of justice. And on top of that, we have a composition in Parliament now where it's still the agenda that they want to enact. Now, we've seen the laws that have been passed, the ATA or the online safety bill, all of that. I think that, right. Until an election is held, it's the same composition. Couldn't they pass more laws in bad faith? And everything has been almost designed to suppress, any kind of dissent and so on. So, by the time we get to the stage election is not held, maybe the entire apparatus has been set to, keep everybody down, that we will not be able to raise up. We even feel our civic space shrinking. Us as a group, we have two protest sites. Both have been attacked in the last month and in the last 2 months. Our group on Sunday was attacked by a mob of 40 about 2 months ago. We gave vehicle numbers, we gave CCTV, no action to this day. We filed an RTI, no reply, so they can simply ignore an RTI. They don't even feel compelled. Then Tassie has a protest at Liberty Circle, which was attacked. In fact, when the mob came, the police walked away. And then we had to beg for the police to come back. So we feel like, even neighborhood protesters like us are now a threat. Even a single voice is not being allowed to break through. So do you think if you wait for the elections at the due time and it doesn't come, it'll be too late for somebody to stand up or get onto the streets, because the entire national security apparatus is focused so heavily on keeping everybody down?
Yeah, I don't certainly say we are waiting for the elections only. Elections have to come. We're certainly, if you take the online safety bill, which they are trying to reduce the space for civil society and for individuals. I personally went to the committee and said, where are the amendments, right? And the amendments were not presented in the committee. It has to be presented in the committee, and subsequently the report has to be written based on those amendments. Then only we will know whether they were in keeping with the Supreme Court judgment. And I'm not talking about other amendments. I'm just talking about the constitutionality of the OSB. And we were not. They said they are going to basically go ahead and vote on it. And then when I questioned it further, I was told, no, but we will be bringing the amendments later. And I was like, you are insulting our intelligence. Why would we pass a bad law knowing that it has to be amended, right? And then the next day, we had a meeting with the Speaker of the House before Parliament commenced, and we brought it up with the Speaker as well, right? And we told the Speaker that report, did the report come to you, Mr. Speaker? And they gave us a piece of paper. It was not a report, it was a minute And they didn't know the difference between a report and a minute. A minute just says a meeting was held, right, and on this thing, and therefore, decision is taken. So process was violated completely on the OSB. As you correctly said, you have a majority in parliament and you use the majority, but process is violated. Now that has been, we are not lying low, that has been contested in the courts, and the Supreme Court gave leave to proceed. And yesterday the Supreme Court heard all the petitioners who made representation and their lawyers, right? And basically what we are contesting here is that my personal view is there is no OSB Act. That's my personal position. Because, right, it hasn't been properly passed. So how can it be an act, right? And the Supreme Court basically is hearing it out. They have heard it out, and they will give a verdict on it. We mustn't confuse this with the Constitution of Sri Lanka gives its citizens only one right in terms of a bill, 2 weeks in which to go and contest it for constitutionality. After the bill is passed in Parliament, you cannot contest it. So there is no post-enactment judicial review. But why we have gone to court here is not for that reason. Why we have gone to court is process, that if it hasn't been followed and the Supreme Court's determinations are not included in the bill, it can't be a bill. So now it's in court. So we are not waiting for elections. We are basically, we said to government, okay, we need an OSB. Let's get the best international practices. Other countries have it. Let's have a discussion. Consult all the groups that need to actually come into the discussion, right? And then we will pass an OSB. We did that with the Anti-Corruption Act. And I must say the government was open to it. I had personally given several private members' bills, including I had given a bill saying that people in public office must make their asset and liability declarations public, right? They included all of the clauses in my private member's bill. When the anti-corruption bill, the government was, 80 amendments were included. I withdrew my bill subsequently, and that was handled by the Justice Ministry, right? But this bill, right, was not handled by the Justice Ministry. This bill came from the Ministry of National Security, but actually committee, public security, but in committee, it didn't go anywhere there. It went to something related to youth affairs and some other ministry. So you can see the confusion, right? So the process was completely violated.
Now, Mr. Suman, I heard that Mr. Sumandiran had filed a case against challenging this. Has the court given leave to proceed for that, or has it already given the determination? It's due to give the determination, or has it heard the whole thing?
It has heard the submissions. It has heard the submissions now. So the court will, over the next couple of weeks, I expect a verdict that will come out.
I was also asking about filing for corruption with regard to, because this is for their advantage. They misuse the whole system, and my position is that they should be charged for corruption. I mean, what is corruption? It's not about taking money and doing something, or that's part of corruption, but that is not the whole context of corruption. So I think this should be also, I don't know, I feel that the opposition should more roll out less. What do you feel about that?
I think first we need to. Yeah, I think first we need to wait for the determination of the court. Then the court will actually say, will uphold the principles. Then, like the earlier one, other cases could follow. Where then particular individuals rather than the system, move from the system to the particular individuals. Yeah.
So. Right now, we have heard the various sort of policy proposals from both the SJB, NPP, and so on, or maybe we need to hear more. I think the people need more clarity because, especially on the economy, where the SJB stands, is it going to be that different from what's going on right now, and how the SJB will act in terms of accountability and so on. And we see that the electorate is swinging to the left. I think that is mainly on the accountability front. I think people are sick and tired of having a country full of crimes, but there are no criminals, scam after scam. I think the next election will essentially be about the people sort of dealing their own verdict and punishment to the people who are in power that they perceive as the ones who brought their lives to such a point of desperation. But before all that, there has to be a pathway for the SJB to come into power, of course, through an election. So there are two questions here. One is, we see the whole, you talked about crossovers, national list, and right now, I think there is acknowledgement across the board that the Vietmaga was responsible for bringing Gotabaya Rajapaksa into power. And now we see Vietmaga members being embraced by the SJB. And also, if they come in, they could also eat up some national list seats, because none of them are elected, if I'm not mistaken. So what is the rationale and what value do they bring to the SJB? Because the general consensus, the popular opinion is that these are the people responsible for the crisis.
Yeah, so we have a dilemma, and the dilemma is a matter of principle. In principle, people who are responsible for the crisis should not be included, right? And it happens like this. You have a party, and when you have a party and new people come and you're taking them into the party, you are fully responsible for who you actually take, particularly when you take public figures. And if those public figures, there are questions about those public figures, you are responsible. Then you have coalition partners. You work with civil society groups and you work with other political parties. When you work with other political parties, you are trying to see if your philosophy, socio-political and socio-economic philosophy, is embraced by them. If it's embraced by them, you go into coalition. When you go into coalition, you cannot basically pre-select every individual in their party, but they become a part of the larger coalition. So I think there's direct and indirect issues there. We are really responsible where we are taking people directly. So I won't say that we are a perfect party. I won't say that. You see, I would always say relatively look at us with the others, one. Second thing I would say is when other people have come, right, and we have taken it, as you are rightly saying, that there are some people who are questionable. I can give you just one concrete example. The media asked me, you're taking all these people, and like you, what's the rationale? They are responsible for different aspects of the crisis. And then I said, during the COVID, when they came up and said that everybody dying has to be cremated, I said we questioned whether there was a scientific basis for it. And there was no scientific basis for it. Then we went public and said, no, you had to do away with this. I remember actually going to Kanata and standing with the other people and politicians and Sajid Premadasa, we all gathered there. Then more recently, one of the people who was actually responsible for that policy, came in. So I told the media when they asked me the question, is that everybody doesn't have to agree with my answer, but this is what I said. I said, people can come, people make mistakes. All of us make mistakes, I said, including myself. But if they are coming, they must go public and make an apology that they have actually made a mistake. And because of their mistake, lots of people have suffered, right? And that's not acceptable. That's why I said everybody won't agree with what I said. Somebody might say, no way, but I'm driven by, some values I hold. And you know what it did? Basically, it got the person to basically leave. So, I'm saying is, yes, there are issues and we have to deal with those issues as and when they arise.
Right. Yeah, contrition. Recently we had Abasarana Thero. I can't mention his name apparently because when you mention that name, something happens to the internet feed. So that's what he made an apology too. I think people will be very skeptical about the true intentions of people who've acted in such bad faith against, and the timing, absolutely. So I think that is the point of contrast, I feel, with the NPP. I think we need to address the fact that the NPP seem to have a much stronger, far more, at least in the eyes of the people, a credible sort of stance against sort of corruption and justice than the SJB. So if you're holding people in your ranks that are questionable, why would people believe that you will take action against people who've caused harm to the country when the party itself has people that has certain questionable conduct in the past?
Because you mentioned NPP, I will have to say this. Certainly, I accept what you said, that people can change, but when people are holding public office, then naturally everybody doesn't have to take that point of view. And then timing is also an issue, because if somebody actually changes, then there must be a period of time to see that they have actually changed, not what they have come and just said verbally. And I accept that. What I would say is, as I said, we are not certainly a perfect party. And that's why I said we have to look at this relatively. What we do have is we have a program how to handle it. And I might say a few things practically, how we will actually do it. But you mentioned about the NPP. It's easy to mention about political parties, right, who have been in office for a short period, not a very long period, right? And it's very questionable of what was delivered and not delivered. And I would tell people, right, please check it for yourself, right? I wouldn't be personal with anybody there, but check it for yourself. But I would make this wider point on governance and on managing the country. Certainly, we must bring down corruption, no question about that. But running a country is not just only that, it's a lot more than that. Sometimes people have very simplistic ideas. Simplistic ideas like they tell you, like, my heavens, we'll go after them, we'll bring all the stolen assets to this country and we'll solve this country's economic problem. This is absolute nonsense. It shows that the people who are saying it have no understanding or grasp about the economic crisis in this country and how deep the crisis is by just getting, Marcos's wealth back or Rajapaksa's wealth back, that we are going to really solve the economic crisis in this country. So that's one of the things I would say there's no understanding. So one of the practical things that we will do is, right, that we will create an independent public prosecutor's office. So I am minister today. The Attorney General is my advisor. Everybody has a lawyer. Attorney General is my advisor. Tomorrow I steal and rob, and then day after you're expecting the Attorney General to put a case against me. That doesn't happen. It hasn't happened if you look at the history of this country. So you need an independent public prosecutor. I'm saying this as I became a politician. I actually studied this. I went to Hong Kong twice, and I looked at the case study there. In 1974, the people in Hong Kong came out against their government, and they didn't go back until they got some commitments from the government. One commitment was independent anti-corruption commission. Another commitment was that they need to have an independent public prosecutor. And up to recent years, some things in Hong Kong have changed more recently, but up to recent years, Hong Kong has been one of the cleaner administrative countries in the world, and they implemented both of those. I looked at the anti-corruption thing in Hong Kong. One of our former people who is the head of the Anti-Corruption Commission here, said that when he was head, he called the Hong Kong chairman of the Anti-Corruption Commission and he said, I want to send some of my people for training there. And the chairman there asked only one question: is your Anti-Corruption Commission independent of the government? One question. And he couldn't give an answer. And he said, please don't send anyone. Right? So you had to have an independent Anti-Corruption Commission. And now I'm saying, going one step further and saying, independent public prosecutor. Cases will be put by the prosecution office, not by the Attorney General. And cases will go on. Cases can't be, withdrawn when governments change and the power dynamics changes. So courts want to dismiss a case, that's fine. So this is one of the practical things that we will do. We need to, people can come and they're sometimes very good at the microphone. They're very good at speaking, much smarter than some of us. We have come from different backgrounds. We've been working all our lives, coming from professional backgrounds, doing management. We haven't been in front of microphones. At 15, 16, 17, 18 years, you become a cadre. You learn to speak, you make your case out. For 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you held a board, you have protested. Lots of people have never ever done a job. They have never been in a corporation, right? They haven't had a boss. They don't know what it's to get up in a early morning into a bus or a crowded train or a van and go to work and have your boss pull you up because you have come late. They don't know about KPIs, right, and goals and performance. They don't know to be promoted or not to be promoted. They have no idea. They don't know of getting a bonus or not getting a bonus. They just have absolutely no idea. So if people think that, like the mistake we made in bringing Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the people around him, that just bringing people without any experience, just because they stand up for an ideal itself is going to transform this country. I'm telling you, right? We will have another cycle in which we will have to actually learn. So it's anti-corruption, yes. Questionable people, there are, right? But we also need to have a way that we are going to do it. Bribery is the other comment I would make. Bribery is everywhere, right? And it is unbelievable. It's unbelievable how much bribery is there. 75% approximately of the country's revenue comes from 3 institutions: Inland Revenue, Customs, and the Excise Department. I was State Minister of Finance to Mangala Samaravira. And I went to Mangala when we were both there. And I said, Mangala, you and I could be the richest people in this country within 6 months. We are not dealing with millions and billions, we are dealing with trillions. And we laughed and joked about it, he and I. Nobody accused Mangala or me of stealing $1 or anybody go and put a case against us. But the bribery and corruption in the country didn't come down even when we were in office. People alone is not enough. You need to have policies, processes, and systems, and you have to have people who understand policies, processes, and systems. Otherwise, just people alone doesn't. And I'm telling you this with first-hand experience. So, again, I'm proposed to my party and in government, right? If we don't see, and I said this yesterday to the Ministry of Finance when they came to Parliament, they were complaining that the Inland Revenue Department was not doing certain things that they were giving, and they had to collect taxes and all that. I said, please make sure that they do fall in line. And I said, if they don't, right, fall in line, right, I'm telling you now, we will have a central revenue collecting authority. Central revenue collecting authority. This is nothing new. Some countries have actually done this, and they have delivered on it, and they have brought their levels of corruption down. They have brought their levels of corruption down, and they have done it successfully. So this is nothing new. But we will have to do this kind of things. And I made a request from them yesterday, where they said, on the President's instructions, they're already working on the law. I said, please go one step further, I told them yesterday. Right? I said, go one step further. Because I said, Sri Lanka's problem is not law. It's the implementation of the law is this country's problem. therefore I said immediately parallel to making the law, please appoint a committee and look at how we are going to implement the Central Revenue Authority. I said start doing it now. In 9 months we'll have a new government. I said it may be us, it may be somebody else, it doesn't matter. We are really looking at systems changes. I said it doesn't matter who it is, government, that needs to be basically started. So I'm saying we have to think about these issues practically, right? Take the ideals, transform it practically, and you need to have people who can actually understand it and who can work on the implementation.
Small question to you. It's in line. You said about the implementation of the law. Now we have even if you all come to power, I have personally experienced it during 2015. The people wanted a change. That was the major turning point in an election. People wanted change. People wanted to go against corruption, and people voted for good governance. And then we found that the police back then they started pulling all these topics that favored the policies, that sometimes laws that were not enacted. The helmet ban law that was stopped by the Rajapaksa regime. Soon as the good governance came in, police got up and said we want to ban it. And then there was a huge protest, and the people, the youth who voted for good governance were on the street protesting to stop the ban on full face helmet. That issue is now resolved. We won the case in the Court of Appeal. But my question is, how are you all going to stop this type of police officers from doing what they want? My feeling is that this police, the authority of the police to take file cases in court should be taken away to a independent body. Such as in other countries, you get the AG for that state, Attorney General of that state, that assistant ADA of that state, and so on, and that they will look at the evidence and decide whether they will go ahead with the case or not. Because these police OICs have so much power, they can
right, and also we see a lot of impunity when it comes to the police, especially recently, and things like this nuclear seems to be enabling more of that type of behavior. Yeah.
In United States, even in other countries where you have a very good law and order, the rankings of corruption, everything is perfect, but there are still police officers who are corrupted. But the thing is, those officers don't have the leverage to do any damage, because they will charge a person, then the AGA will say, and no, there is no case here, I can't file this. You can't charge that person like that. So basically, that is the system that is lacking. So do you all feel that you all need to take action? My policy, what I've been public about it. I've said if an officer has broken the fundamental rights of a person, the state had to pay compensation. The officer had to pay compensation. I think he should no longer be in the police service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't that a decent request?
Well,
we have the acting IGP who has been
acting
convicted
IGP
of
who,
fraud.
so I think the entire national security setup is under highly questionable, flawed sort of
We saw the case of this boy who refused to take that award.
He's being harassed.
He's been victimized by the police.
That cyclist
Actually,
He's one of us.
Yeah,
refused to take the award from DIG Ajit Rohan. Now he and his family are being
harassed on a daily basis. Police visiting their house, all sorts of things. They've had to go and file a fundamental rights petition against that. How to tackle this case?
So I won't say that there is one easy answer in tackling it. If you look at the torture cases, and I'm not talking about 10 years ago, there were more than 1,000 documented cases, and a book was printed. And I have got a copy of that book. It was actually sent to me, right? So, that's 10 years ago, so it may be now 20,000 or whatever the number is. Documented cases. So clearly we have to admit that we have a huge problem on our hands. And then we need to look at, how do you actually tackle it? Now, systems need to be put right, but also it depends on your determination to actually tackle it. Because you referred to the judgment that has recently been given. that several police officials have been convicted by the court,
Including the IGP.
including the acting IGP, right? And then the executive arm of government, right? President Ranil Wickremesinghe, if he's serious about the rule of law, he should have been basically acting on it, and he hasn't acted on it, right? So what I'm saying is that example issue is important, right? It's not a systemic in that sense. It will depend on each individual there, but it's an important one, right? Who are the people at the top. Then system-wise, we need to look at it. In principle, if anybody has violated the law, anybody, then clearly there has to be repercussions. So even if it's a politician, top government official, a police official, it doesn't matter who it is, the law must apply. There's no other way that you can put this country right. You can't shield people, but the law must apply. One other thing I would say is this. As I said, there's no one clear answer, right? The other thing that we need to heavily invest on, right? Heavily invest on is actually on human resource development and training. Heavily we have to invest. So the Samagijana Balavege, the SJB, we've taken one in principle decision, right? Because we are drawing up our policies on governance. And one decision was we are coming with bankruptcy, the economy has to be turned around, limited resources. How do you deploy your limited resources? So one big in principle decision we have made is we are going to put it on soft infrastructure, not on hard infrastructure. If I put it another way, we are going to put it on human resources, right? On human resources. So education will get prime place with its preschool, school, higher education, and systemic as well, open the system out and all. And then heavily invest on the public service. And I'm talking of all of the public service, including the police and everyone, in training and so forth. And because I believe that that's also important, because people actually need to know, how to operate and within what framework to operate. Often we have underestimated the importance of that. My personal experience was I worked for an international bank, right? And I got a very small salary, but they spent more than 10 times my salary annually just on training me. I came with that experience. I went to head up one of Sri Lanka's larger banks, and I remember sitting there and looking at the training budget, and in my first year, I just increased it by 3 times, 300%. And people said, why? You see, because I came to the understanding that if you really want to get good results, you have to invest in people. And I would say in the public service, right, the investment is very, very, very low, particularly on training. And therefore, we have to commit ourselves to actually doing that.
Right. So to enact your agenda, you need a path to power. So whether it's a presidential, general election, is there a path to a majority for the SJB? This is a two-parter. The other is that, us as activists, people who are engaged in the political process, we are frustrated that the main opposition is constantly at each other, because we feel that lets those in power off the hook. Everything, so the focus seems to be, obviously, come an election, we can see that happening. But shouldn't the possibility of power sharing be entertained, and can that even be possible if the opposition is constantly sort of at loggerheads? That's why I asked earlier, are your frenemies or bitter rivals? So, because some even say that, there are rumors that, the SJB might link with the UNP. There are all sorts of, stories being floated around. SJB is only going to be left with 15, everybody's going over. Of course, we've heard this continuously. But shouldn't that be explained to the public, how you're going to get to a majority?
Yes, so I'm thankful for asking that question. This narrative has been proposed right along, that the SJB is going to go to pieces, everybody is leaving, everybody will join something else. It's absolutely rubbish, right? That narrative, and that narrative has been promoted. The other narrative that has been promoted is that Sajid Premadasa is inadequate, right? And if you really think about it, right, he's the only one who has a wide base, right, a very, very wide base. And it's natural for the SLPP and for the UNP to actually see him in a sense as the common enemy. There's nothing unnatural about it, right? And then promote that thing that he can't do. This reminds me about, the thing that was promoted on Ranil Wickremesinghe years back, Ranil Tabak, right? Ranil Tabak, right? So at least they have identified him, right, and done that. I would say that there is no perfect leader, right? We haven't had perfect leaders in the past. You think about everybody we have had. SWRD Bandaranayaka, Sirimavo Bandaranayaka, Rajapaksa, Mahinda Rajapaksa, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Premadasa, no perfect leader. There will be pluses and minuses. You think of the future, Sajid Premadasa, right? Who else is there? Ranil Wickremesinghe, another Rajapaksa, Anurukumara Disanayaka. I'm telling you, you don't have a perfect leader. So you have to look at it relatively, right? Relatively, right? So there are strengths and weaknesses. Sajid Premadasa's strengths are, right, he's open to ideas and, looking at policy, he's open to that, right? Sajid Premadasa has an accumulated houses and wealth overseas or in this country. Accusations that have come generally have been procedural. When he has been minister, I've been on COPE and I've basically looked at it, right? After the Easter bombing, he said, I can't wait 1.5 years for the process. I want to quicken it. These churches have to be built. He said temples have to be done quickly and therefore process kind of issues, right? So no accusation of basically accumulating personal wealth or anything. Then people will say experience. Look at his experience and Ranil Wickremesinghe's experience. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Ranil Wickremesinghe also has been 50 years in politics. You can decide about his experience and the track record and what's delivered. In that sense, Sajid Premadasa is new, relatively new. He's occupying the highest position in a political party only in the last 2.5, 3 years, recently since we formed the SJB, right? So it's relative. If you look at it like that, it's relative. So I would say we are going beyond that, right? And then look at his policies and let's look at the team. And then decide, right, whether you think the leader is a part of it, then he has a team, he has policies, right? And then compare that with everybody else and see, where it is. When you say that the opposition is fighting each other, I know there have been some issues about particular individuals, right? Particular individuals. That doesn't mean that just because there are differences with particular individuals, that the SJB is at loggerheads. We are not at loggerheads. We are the biggest party in the opposition. Our base is very big and it's rural. We have a network that we build. If you come, and I would in fact invite any of you who want to actually come and see it. I'm inviting you. You can come with me. You can come with me in Colombo this week. You can come with me to Mayangana this week, right? There will be hundreds and hundreds of people are turning up at our meetings. We just had 3 days ago one meeting. There were 7,000 women in that meeting. So I'm inviting people. Come and see. Just don't go by only social media. What you are seeing on social media. I'll be frank with you. I don't even have the money basically to put down on social media. But if people want to come and actually see it, I'm inviting you to Buttala, and I will show you even this Saturday, what's going to happen there, right, and who is there. So we are working on the ground. We are working on the base. And I'm asking people, really take a clear look. Look at the others who are running with us. I want to know what their policy on state-owned enterprises. I will not back down on saying some of them we will shut down. Some of them we will privatize. Some of them we will go for public-private partnerships. And where it's absolutely essential for the security of the citizens of the country, things like utilities, the government will play a direct role. I would say that. If you ask me about education, I will say we are going to open the education system in this country. For too long, we have been fooled, you see, by wrong policy. We are going to open it up. We are going to agree that a higher spend on education is needed. We had a parliamentary select committee appointed around January 2023. Around the table, all the parties, we agreed there that a high spend is needed on education. We agreed there, right, during that thing, that the private sector has to be legitimate, not come through the back door in education. They has to be legitimate, right, legitimized thing. We agreed that non-government, non-profit distributing sector should be legitimate, like lots of other countries in the world have, and they have top universities on that model. We agreed on all of that. Report was written. Vijay Rajapaksa was chairman of that select committee. I was the SJB member who participated the most. And then we were told to sign. At the moment of signing, right, my good friend, and I have very high regard for her, Harini Amarasuriya didn't sign. And she sent her reasons why she can't sign. And if I were to just put it in a crux, I put it like this, that it will weaken the government universities. Weaken the government universities? They already rank, I said somewhere beyond 1,000. Somebody corrected me and said it's beyond 1,800. I don't know. You can check it on the internet yourself. There's nothing more to weaken it. Someone else came and said to me, my heavens, if we allow these private universities, including we will allow foreign universities to come and open here. We are going to open it out. They also can come and set up. Then somebody said, this person in a government university, a professor or lecturer, will leave and go to the private university. I said, what's the problem? What's the problem? A mother has 3 children. Only one child will go to state university at most. The other children will go into a private university, or they'll go for a professional education, or at least a vocational education. For a mother, it makes no difference. Every child is important. A mother knows the psychology of the child. A mother loves every child. They are not measured by exam results. Mothers don't measure it that way, you see. So we need to understand that. That is why, right, we have to create a system where every child gets an education depending on their skills. Everybody doesn't have to go to university. Some need just practical things to do. And this is our policy. So when they said it will weaken, I said, please don't talk crap. If that person leaves the government university and goes to a private university, I'll be happy because they're going to be teaching another child of that mother. What's your problem with that? I said, look at it another way. If they don't have that opportunity, they'll go overseas, and then you'll come and complain and say brain drain,
The
brain
question
drain.
is, if you
I
had
said
to
we
form
have
an
to.
alliance between the JVP or the UNPSLPP alliance, which one would you? I mean, that's a direct question, right?
We will.
Is there a direct path to power for the SJB? If not,
No,
would
we
you
will
look at-
not be forming any alliance. We will not be forming any alliance. We will be going into the elections by presenting our program and our view. And now, other parties have been campaigning for 1.5 years. They have been campaigning. We were the main opposition party. We were very focused on bringing down the government. We were very focused on keeping the opposition together. In January 2024, it has changed because it's an election year. We are now campaigning, and therefore we will also then have to be critical of others in the opposition as well, which we were not previously. And our criticality is not on individuals. It's on policy and it's on implementation. And then the people are going to be given a choice. The people decide. This is a democratic process. And let the people decide. And then once they have decided, if we are given the opportunity, we will run it. If they decide otherwise...
Because realistically, it's very difficult for one party to get a majority, isn't it?
No.
No?
No.
There is a path. Well,
There is a-
there is a path. Well, I mean,
That is the question.
One person has to win the presidency, no?
Yeah.
One person has to win the presidency.
But
Yeah.
when you're talking about when you go to parliamentary.
Yeah, so parliamentary elections, there are
No, I know.
always
So-
have been coalitions in parliamentary elections.
So I think that
That
was
can
what
be
we
after
wanted to-
election, you can decide, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was what we wanted to.
I just want to know.
Yeah.
I just want to know if during
That
the
was actually-
presidency, suppose there are three parties who come to the like main roles, two or three will come, and then they get nobody gets 50%. Then what happens?
You're talking of the presidential or the general?
Yes,
Presidential is if nobody gets 50%, then they will look at the second preference. And once a second preference is counted, the person with the highest number of votes is president of the country. So there's a president.
I was referring to parliamentary elections.
Yeah. So parliamentary elections will depend on the outcome. If you want to have a majority government, then you will get in with partners at that time.
That's what I want
Yeah,
to get.
I mean,
Whether the
you
SJB
got to wait
would
for
be
the
willing
outcome
to.
of an election to then decide how you're going to
After the
create the
outcome.
composition.
Given the shrewd nature of this current president, I don't know if he will go for the election or
Okay, let's not. Okay, I think we'll.
parliament.
Okay, we don't need to like get into that that territory. But Eran, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you. We've gone over like an hour, 15, 20 minutes now. You okay? Are you okay for another 10 minutes? Is that all right? How long have you gone for? Oh, quick question about transparency within the party. Quick question, because this is something that's discussed on social media, programs like Sakvala and so on, about funding and donors for parties. How does the SJB get its funding, and how are they able to do these programs like Sakvala?
I can tell you specifically of Sakvala, right? Sakvala is a program in which we go to a school, and we are generally taking not national schools, we're taking the schools in the provincial councils, and they don't have information technology, and we're focusing on information technology. We give one smart board and we give 5 computers and a few other things. And how we do it is, we ask somebody we know and say, would you like to make a donation so that this can be donated to a school? And then if they agree to do that, that money is sent directly to the supplier, and it doesn't come to the party or to any of us as individuals. The money doesn't come at all, it's sent directly there. And that smart board or the computers will be taken from there, and it will be basically. Where we come in is only here, and I'll tell you firsthand where we come in. If they come in, let's say I'm the organizer of a particular area in an electorate, and they said, okay, we have got a donor and we can do this in your electorate. I have put down criteria, minimum size of the school, right? There's no point giving it to a very small school with investment, more people have to benefit. And then I check whether they have an information technology teacher, because you need the teacher as well, right? And then separately, I will try to see if I can get some other person to help with the internet connection and the monthly payments. None of it comes, it goes directly there, and then where we come in is in the selection of the school. So I put the criteria, and in my case, of course, I told the zonal education director, you tell me which of these schools you should give it. Zonal education director said, give it to this school, and it goes there. And then we go there, and that's how Sakvala is done.
The buses are the same?
Buses are the same. Buses are the same. Money basically is goes.
Would the SJB publish their donors?
We may not publish it, right? It will depend on the donor.
It will depend on
It will depend on the donor.
Right. We asked this from Prashant as well, and he said sometimes when you publish names, other people solicit, and it becomes a. So that was the answer. Go ahead.
Yeah. But certainly we are. I must say that very, very clearly. We thought about it, and this is how we have done it.
Right.
So on this one, I can say that for sure.
Right.
One last question. We, and I think myself also, we've spoken and saying, because we're so frustrated with the system, especially during the queues and all that, we said that 225 plus 1 must go. But of course, we realize the value in Parliament in having people like yourself, Harsha, Mrs. Sumandiran, Dr. Harini, and Mr. Rasamanikam, to mention a few. I can't think of many others among the 226 who we'd like to say that represent us. But during Yahapalane, when you were a minister, the bond scam happened. It cost us 12 billion rupees. As we were not even activists at that time, some of us, I mean, Chirant has been activist for far longer, but majority of us not. As laymen, what we saw was, we heard was that the bond scam was, what should I say, was I don't have a word for that. Anyway, people like yourself and Harsha were accused of being the footnote Kalya. That is a word said in Sinhalese, for sort of legitimizing or justifying the bond scam that happened. What exactly happened there and what really happened there? That's what I want to know.
I need to correct you straight away. Have never been accused of being a footnote Kalya. Never been accused. That is because I think they were dealing in a committee. I was not a part of that committee. And because they made notes in explaining it, then some people, I think Sunil Handuneti probably was chair of that or whatever, I can't remember exactly, and said this is a footnote Kalya, trying to justify it. In fact, I had the complete opposite issue. And the complete opposite issue I had is when it came for investigation in COPE. I was a member of COPE, and when it came into investigation, and I took the position on the bond scam that nobody is guilty till proven. And I worked with Dew Gunasekara on that, and I said we had to go about it really professionally, looking at it and trying to prove it. And that's how we actually worked at it. And Dew Gunasekara is somebody you can have on your program. You say, Dew Gunas, because the name came up, I just suddenly remembered, right? Dew Gunasekara will tell you, right, how closely we worked. So closely I worked that I was accused by the party that I was not pulling the party line at that time, you see. So that's what really happened. I would say this about the bond scam, or trading scams have always been there. Right? These practices have always been there and not being corrected. There are lots of people out there who have actually benefited from it. And this certainly, lots of questions were raised and you had to find the answers. And then if the information was not used properly, certainly the people should have been punished. I am asking why, after the change of government even, that they haven't really proceeded on the prosecutions. So is it that there is really no basis to the story you just said, that 12 billion was lost? Maybe there is no basis at all, right? Or we have to question the Attorney General's department if there is a basis, why they haven't proceeded with the prosecutions.
Okay. Satisfied? Yeah. So, Eran, thank you so much. I think we'll probably have to end it there because we have a lot more questions. Actually, there's a whole series because all the members contributed various questions about tackling corruption, reducing government expenditure, prioritizing, what would the SJB budget prioritize, how will you deal with the public sector, how you will deal with unions, about the defense budget, about defense spending. I think we could have you back if you're all right for another session so we can go into all of that. But for now, I think we'll leave it there. Right?
Thank you very much.
We really appreciate talking to you, and it's always very interesting, and we always love listening to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I have another appointment and they're sending messages.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's the only reason I'm going. I certainly would have stayed.
No, not an issue. Can you wait for 1 minute? Because Leisha usually has a quote of the day she finds an appropriate quote for the week.
Yeah. So I have two. One is change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. So, I'm hoping 40 years from now, we're still not struggling.
About this. Yeah, absolutely.
And the second one is actually for people like you. It is now more than ever necessary that political leaders be outstanding for honesty, integrity, and commitment to the common good. That is a quote from Pope Francis.
Yeah, and the first one was for Martin Luther King Jr. So thank you, Leisha, as usual. As always, you find the right quote for the right week. Can we leave you with the final word before we close? Is there anything that you'd like to tell us?
All I would say is everyone basically needs to very carefully analyze policies that are being put forward, the people behind it, and the chances of implementation. we have been taken for a ride by the media in the last round, and we need to be careful that what we say and always question it. I don't even forward anything without really questioning it. And let's all work, get together and work for a better country. I get up every morning and I ask myself why I'm in politics. I'm in politics to change this system so that your children will remain in this country, not just return for your funeral.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you. So I think we'll leave it at that. So I think that's a wrap for day 257, right? I hope you're not here forever, ever doing this. And that, that we do see changes. We really hope for an election because I think that'll be clarifying for the whole world, not just for us. So thank you once again. Thanks to the team for always, standing for what's right. And we'll be back at our corner on Sunday for day 258. And that's a wrap for tonight from GGY. Thank you. Good night. Thanks.